remarkable shift from centralization to decentralization in two stories that are taking place here in Chattanooga. One is on the front page of the Chattanooga Times Free Press this morning, and that is the sale of the Chattanoogan Hotel, a city-owned, government-owned property that seeks to make profit, but which is requiring to have every year now for at least a decade and a half or a couple decades, is required to have taxpayer subsidies to stay afloat. The other story is one about the private capital raising market that is being made possible by the digital economy. That is to say, the internet economy, the sharing economy, and that is through sites very much like GoFundMe, Indiegogo, and Kickstarter. But here now we have a development allowed by a change in the Jobs Act of 2012 that was signed by President Obama, that is now allowing for there to be small scale capital raising efforts by small business. In other words, a trend towards decentralization and an ending of the government's stranglehold upon capitalism and upon capital itself, much to the chagrin of people of character, of savers, and others who believe that your wealth is not your debt but your assets. We have, of course, the government that has turned against capitalism since the time of Roosevelt, has turned against capitalism, favoring state capitalism and corporate capitalism, and in the end, I would say, taking much value from the people of the country. Those organizations and those processes have decapitalized the American economy, and you, my listener, are way poorer than you're poorer, and you know what, you deserve it, because we are the object of their attentions, and we're the object of national government's claim upon the economy and upon the free market for itself, right? And so who prospers? Well, not you and me here in Chattanooga. We don't prosper, but there are many connected people, the financial Harvey Weinsteins, if you will, who turn people into whores. That they are the ones who are prospering in the national economy. And so now the change that we're seeing at a platform hosted by the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union, we can see there the change for the better. And that is a restoration of local economy over time and a liberation of local economy. So the two stories are about the concept of centralization and decentralization. And that what we want is the second, and what we have still way too much of is the first. The city is getting out of the hotel business, and a local credit union, I think the largest credit union in Chattanooga, is joining and hosting and marketing and pumping the efforts of Growth Fountain, which is a web platform that allows for small investors who are not bigwigs, right? Not certified or qualified or accredited investors. That's the proper word, accredited. They're not accredited investors, and yet they can involve themselves in lawful investment schemes without all the lawyers, without all the accountants, and without the intervention and the supervision of the good people at the Security and Exchange Commission. Well, this is David Tulis, and these are exciting developments, and I think Andy Burke is making the best of it in his quote in the newspaper to Dave Flessner, that the creating and the debt burden that the city took on to build this hotel and run it has done its job. Now the South Side has been revived, and we can let it go. We can sell it off into private hands, and we've done our job. So that's putting a very favorable gloss on what is mere merchantry, mere commercial government. But I say you can take that as a way of thinking about what's happening in the sale as publicized today in the newspaper, and yesterday at Chattanooga.com, the sale of the Chattanoogan Hotel for $32 million. The buyer is Schulte Hospitality Group, and in Kentucky. And Daisy Madison, the administrator of the city, says that this move will save $2 million in subsidies and will bring property taxes past $600,000 a year and also a revenue stream for parking as well. Well, this is David Tulis, and I'm glad you're giving me just a couple minutes of your time. We're here at 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4, the digital channel. That's HD4. All new cars have HD, and the advantage of that is the tremendous power. The voltage in those signals is extraordinary, and you can hear us still on your radio, not even on your smart device, 60 miles out. So that's halfway to Knoxville or Nashville. You can still hear our wonderful shows. We are the Sean Hannity station, Bloomberg News at 1 every day, Bloomberg Financial News, the politics, power, and policy program first at 1, and then at 2, Bloomberg Markets. That's every day here for our high-end listeners who matter and can just take a few minutes out to check the capital markets and the treasuries and the like, the stock market. There's a stock report every 15 minutes in that program, and I think both those programs. And we are here to serve you and to keep you current on the world's news in terms of the fiat money economy worldwide, which is what we have, and certainly is very exciting thing to watch. If we had a hard money economy in this world, if we had a world that had reached its census, it hasn't yet. But when the world is restored to its senses and says no more, we are finished with debt. We're finished with debt economies and debt mediums of exchange and fiat money that enriches the insiders. You'll have again a boring global economy. That the arrival of that solid economy, the economy of substance over debt, is some time away, probably past your grandchildren's lives, you, my listeners, grandchildren's lives. Now, I do appreciate your giving me just a couple minutes of your time. My name is David Tulis, and our show is brought to you by Nooganomics.com. I have a kind of a long snaggletooth analysis at Nooganomics.com this morning, and I want you to take a look at it. It's a work that would be better if it were shorter, but the problem with a writer is that you don't have enough time to keep it short, right? And if you have a little bit of time in which to analyze something or write something, the problem is that it's going to be longer than it needs to be. If you have more time, it'll be shorter, right? And that is because the time that you have is used in economy of words and rethinking your material and noticing, for example, missteps in the argument, missteps in the logic, and redundancy. So go to Nooganomics.com, and the question that I raise, it's an economic question, is one that is touched upon by a local book by Steve Corbett and Brian Fickert, published by the Chalmers Center up at Covenant College. And the title of the book is When Helping Hurts, How to Alleviate Poverty Without Hurting the Poor and Yourself. It was a surprise bestseller. And I'm holding here, I think it's been through more than one edition. I've got, I think, the first edition published by Moody Publishers in Chicago, 2009. So this book is already 8 years old, and I highly recommend it. The essay that I have at Nooganomics.com, I just want to pique your interest in it. If you haven't been to that website of our chief sponsor, is the problem of the big Goddard and small Goddard church. Now, I know that sounds funny, but it comes from an expression that comes from a Professor Wilson, who would check in on his students at the School of Theology, and they were giving their trial sermons, right? And he would just step in for a few minutes and listen. And in one occasion, he hears part of a sermon, maybe 15 minutes of it, and then walks out. And the man giving the sermon, a noted Christian, by the way, kind of tenderly walks over afterwards and says, "How did I do? Did I do okay?" And Professor Wilson says, "Well, I didn't need to hear the whole thing, son. I just wanted to see if you were a big Goddard or a small Goddard, and I think you're a big Goddard. You'll be okay." And the question for us is the size of God worshipped in the churches in Chattanooga. And I've been visiting churches in Chattanooga with members of my family, and seeing, I'm looking for something, and I'm looking to solve a problem. Well, what is the problem that I'm looking to solve, and how is it that this church or that might be able to solve the problem? And in that review, this book by Steve Cord and Brian Figured. It's a sensational and wonderful volume. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's called When Helping Hurts: How to Alleviate Poverty Without Hurting the Poor and Yourself. And the problem that this book addresses is the same one that I address here on the David Tulis show at Nooga Radio, and that is the necessity for the scale, understanding scale, and having a local economy solution for a problem that may not be caused by local people, but it would be, let's say, a national policy or national program that causes a local problem. And how do we can't solve the national version of the issue, but we can solve it perhaps in its fruits, bitter or good, locally. And that is the argument for a local economy, the free market. And of course, I would say the doctrines of grace. That would be the favor that God has for grace and favor and forgiveness of others, and for caring about other people and putting other people first, even if we don't make a profit. Right? That is what Christian charity requires, and which is modeled best in the free market. If you have a free market, what you see there is, even though some people win, some people lose. Some people get a sale and others don't. Some people lose their jobs and others find jobs. In that marketplace, there's a bit of creative destruction, to use Schumpeter's phrase, but it's generally favorable because all people are moving about in labor and service and consumption and production, and it has the least friction, the least cost, and the most benefit to the most people. That's what the free market gives you. And this book deals with how that works in the church, and how churches can, and boards of deacons and individual Christians can bring about reformation of morals individually in families and among individuals, and how the effect of that is really a wonderful small and growing location in a local economy, in a place even that's very poor, a place that is marked by poverty, marked by despotic national governments, bad police. And the book covers missionary efforts and how they are best brought about to change cultures, to change whole cultures, starting with individuals. And so the view is not just the individual, as much of Christianity cares about solely, but the larger culture. And so my question about the big God and the small God or church is, are there churches in Chattanooga that teach a big God as opposed to the small God? Both are good. Both are loving. Both are God loving His people. But in one fellowship, there's a view of the larger whole, and that touches on questions that I, as a writer here in Chattanooga, look at a great deal. And that would be questions of justice and injustice. And my interest in that is not just because I care about law, but because my understanding of the gospel is that Christianity is not a mystical system. It's not a metaphysical system. It is an ethical and judicial system. And by that, I mean that God is has ethical requirements upon us. In other words, he has a rule for right and a rule for wrong. And He expects every human being to live by that rule, and that every human being will love Him and fear Him, love Him for His benefits, fear Him, to fear displeasing Him and violating His commands, and that if we love God and obey Him, then we will be prosperous, right? And if we don't love God much and disobey His commands, well, then we'll be under judgment, right? We'll have disaster, we'll have bad crops, we'll have disease, we'll have plagues, we'll have invasions, we'll have floods, and we'll have central banks. These are the kind of things that are judgments against the people, even in this country. Just look at the physical stature of your average American. Just look at how his bones sit in his flesh, and how much flesh there is. And you can see that we are a people who've been laid aside, right? God has passed us by in many, many ways, and He's left us to our own devices, right? He's left us to our own free will, if you will. And so we have elected, and we keep wanting things that are bad, and we keep wanting things that are wrong, and we want things that are sinful, right? So when we have the things that we want that are sinful, we get even more judgment upon ourselves. And so that's the question that I'm asking about it at Nooganomics.com. And you might listener think that you're getting everything you need from David Tulis here. And in a way, that's true. You just give me 5 minutes, and you've kind of got the whole world that I've studied today. And in my presentation today, you've got kind of all of it summarized in just a few minutes. Give me 5 minutes, and you'll have more or less the tenor of the whole 2 hour show. And I'd like to make it a 3-hour show, and I'm going to complain to management that I need another hour on the David Tulis program from 11 to 12, right, in which I'll take your calls. And I don't think management will agree with that, though, and will keep me constrained in 2 hours in my 4 23-minute segments. And I'm glad you're giving me just a couple minutes here on this one. And the number is 800-8949, 800-8949. There's I wanted to get to kind of follow up on the point that if I can just find everything that I have printed out here. Yeah. Also, just by the way, there's a bit of fraud going on in state government that I saw a sample of it in 2015 with an open records request that caused the state prosecutor in Knoxville to drop a prosecution of an innocent man. And it was just, I asked a question. Like I say, I asked the dumb questions. David Tulis, the slow man of Chattanooga, right? I asked the dumb questions, and a prosecutor in another county drops a prosecution of an innocent person because I asked the dumb question. And I'm going to ask the dumb question again, this time of the new commissioner of safety in Nashville, and it is of a thing called legal fictions. Legal fictions are things that are in the law, and you find them periodically here and there, and they are a kind of analogy. You have a structure in a legal case that it's not really there, but it's there by kind of analogizing by all the parties. All the parties agree that this certain thing is true, and in fact, it's completely made up. And we have a court system that allows a lot of them. Now, courts and laws have them they're inevitable in law that you have legal fictions, but we have one operating in Nashville right now against another free traveler of the public road, and this free traveler is a man who has my great interest. And I'll tell you why. Because I have an interest in the stranger in Chattanooga and in Hamilton County. And I think you should too. You should have an interest in the stranger because it's the right thing to have. It's the right thing to have. And what I propose to do in just a minute, even though you're not a Christian, okay, even though you don't care about the church and you don't go to church, and you may remember a fairy tale or two, right, from Sunday school, right, when you were a 9-year-old, but you don't go now, and you don't really care. But I think there's something to say in the book that you don't open today that has a view to prospering you, and it touches on the care of the stranger. And I think what I want to do is invoke in you the stranger, and how it is that God Himself cares about the stranger, and how if we care about the stranger, that we are going to be opening ourselves to new things. And if we have a superior culture, we will be able to transfer that to other people who may take it back to their home countries, right? Who may export the things that they get from us. And the main thing that I would say, I know you have a reservation on this point, but the main thing I would say we have to offer is the gospel truth, in which there is a gracious God, and the fruits of that relationship that God has with man has the free market, right? The free market is a fruit of Christianity, and it's a fruit of Christianity because the entrepreneur is a man who does what Jesus does, right? Jesus on the cross dies for not just people indifferent, but his enemies. He dies for his enemies, and the entrepreneur is the same. In the same way, he's thinking about other people. He's constantly working to make his customer richer, better, safer, saving money, having less breakdown, having a factory which has more efficiencies, more being produced in less space, more produced maybe with less employees, right? That's what the entrepreneur is doing. He's always thinking about the other. whether he's a Christian or not, doesn't matter. He could be a Muslim. He could be an atheist. He could be a Hindu. But if he's doing that, if he's following the dictates of Christ, to look out for the stranger first and the neighbor first, then that man will prosper in his business, whether it's writing software or making sandwiches. He's going to prosper. And so to cure the stranger, the Department of Safety, I think, is very much against strangers. This is a cause of great concern, because if it hurts the stranger, it's hurting you. And there, as I make note of in my story at Nooganomics today, I think there are about 4 million licensed drivers in Tennessee. They've all been deprived of a constitutionally guaranteed right for the sake of commercial government and for the sake of oppressing strangers. And it's happening now.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
Alfred Hayes Jr. was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated assault a year ago, and criminal court judge Tom Greenholz signed an order requested by attorneys that would put him involuntarily in Moccasin Bend Mental Health Institute for the public good. The statement says he'll be in a restrictive treatment setting for his own safety and for that of the public. He's accused of trying to rape and strangle a 13-year-old girl a year ago. He was 28 at the time. On Monday,